At the beginning of the last episode, I mentioned that I would be hosting a virtual event on Saturday, February 22nd. Due to some changes, the event has now been rescheduled to 1 week later, so it will be held on Saturday, March the 1st instead. The event, Dancing with Darkness, a virtual descent into the vital mystery of light and shadow, will be a rich gathering featuring a storyteller, 2 visionary talks from past guests of the podcast, Ganga Devi Braun and Daje Alo, and a live conversation between myself and Samuel Adams, who will be featured in an upcoming episode. Guided by the wisdom of 3 remarkable women and enriched by an intimate dialogue between 2 men, this event promises to offer soulful explorations, profound insights, and thought-provoking inquiries into navigating life's inevitable shadows with more depth, creativity, and reverence. Our hope is to humbly illuminate diverse facets of the intricate dance between light and shadow, and to follow up with interactive Q&A sessions where you can engage directly by asking questions and reflecting on the insights shared. Together, we will journey into the fertile dark, emerging with renewed curiosity, inspiration, and a deeper sense of awe for the mysteries that lie within. A recording will be available with every ticket purchase, so you can access the content again at any time after the event. So follow the link in the show notes and join us on this virtual descent into the vital mystery of light and shadow. Welcome to Wild Heart Revival, a gathering place for heartfelt conversations and stories as pathways of renewal and revival. I'm your host, Tay Tayari, and today is a special episode where we are welcoming 3 guests, Patrick Saline, Murray Kyle, and Thomas Duchin. I want to apologize in advance for the audio imbalances in this episode. Unfortunately, not everyone was recording on a separate audio track, which made balancing the audio a bit challenging in the production phase. I was adjusting volumes on the fly through my computer during the conversation, so I did my best. However, you might need to adjust the volume here and there, and I hope it's not too frustrating or laborious. Thank you for your understanding, and bless you for your forgiveness. These 3 men and I had a powerful conversation about peace, particularly the cultivation of peace as men during these beautifully troubled times. The discussion arose because Patrick, Murray, and Thomas are hosting a 5-day immersive journey of brotherhood, musical artistry, and transformational breath in the Appalachian Mountains this April. The event, called Men's Prayer for Peace, has a really nice website with all the details that you'd want to know, which you can find in the show notes, so go check that out. Patrick Saline is a heart-centered healing artist specializing in psychosomatic therapy, psychospiritual guidance, and conscious connected breath. A certified facilitator and senior trainer in breathwave, he offers private retreats, breathwork trainings, and psychedelic integration consultation globally. With over a decade of psychotherapy practice and community leadership, Patrick integrates psychotherapeutic wisdom and natural mysticism in his integral breathwork offerings. Murray Kyle is a mystic troubadour and voice facilitator from Byron Bay, Australia. He uses sound as a powerful tool for emotional expression and healing. His soul-restoring music inspires global, earth-honoring practices and a deeper connection to all beings. Through transformative circles, Murray guides individuals in using their voice for healing, growth, and authentic connection. Thomas Duchin is the creator and lead facilitator of Heart of Men, an organization dedicated to fostering well-being for men across the continent of North America. With over a decade of experience in holding space for group process, Thomas brings a unique artistry to the circle, where the mundane meets the miraculous. He lives in the Appalachian Mountains, stewarding a 22-acre land project with his family, where this work deepens in relationship to place. You can learn more about each of these wonderful men through their website, which is linked in the show notes. If you're new to the show, you might like to know that I'm a counseling psychologist with an online practice dedicated to supporting wanderers, wanderers, and edgewalkers. I offer individual, couples, and group counsel, as well as support around death and dying. To learn more, visit my website through the link in the show notes. I also offer free insight calls, which provide a risk-free opportunity for us to connect, explore our alignment, and determine if we're a good fit to walk alongside each other during a pivotal time in your life. I'm generally open to connecting via video chat if you feel naturally drawn to do so, whether for guidance, curiosity, collaboration, or any other meaningful reason, so feel free to reach out at any time. I'd be happy to receive you. And if you haven't yet, I invite you to subscribe to Wild Heart Revival on your preferred podcast platform. And please know that your likes, comments, ratings, and shares are not only deeply appreciated, they're vital for supporting the organic growth of these heartfelt conversations and stories. Now, let's lift our prayers for peace together as we welcome these three brothers and their beautiful hearts. Gandhi says, "There is no path to peace. Peace is the path."
Mm-hmm.
Thich Nhat Hanh says, "Peace is present right here and now in ourselves and in everything we do and see. The question is whether or not we are in touch with it. Peace is not merely the absence of war. It is the presence of justice, of law, of love, of creativity."
Mm-hmm.
So I want to wade out into the waters of this dialogue, this exploration of what peace means to us as individuals, as brothers. And I thought that a good place to start would be for all of us to kind of succinctly, briefly share a moment where peace was very evident in our lives, whether we witnessed a moment of great peace or we took part in a moment of peace, just to kind of set the stage for from an experiential standpoint of peace in our lives. So if anyone has something, immediately take the stage.
Well, I'll jump in with a just last night I was kicking back here at home with my wife Annalise, and we watched a short video of two musicians, Jacob Collier and Chris, what's his name, the brother from, I'm forgetting his name suddenly, from Coldplay. And they did this piece with two men, one microphone and a keyboard, and probably I'm going to guess, say it's like 10,000 people in a stadium. And it just struck me so deeply, that the whole entire field of humanity was singing and was humming and was in this resonant field of like awareness and expansion and anchorage all at once. And brought me to tears, man. It was a powerful signal of humanity's potential in this time, that when a peaceful harmonic field is awakened amongst our species, it's alive, it's welcoming, it's it's like a magnet. And so that really struck me, and one of the quotes you just shared, that when creativity is alive, peace is here when creativity is alive. So beautiful. And I feel like that quality of leadership, that the texture of that man or woman who is at peace within themselves is the sort of leadership that we're in dire need of now, and so it's beautiful to witness artists, anyone, humanity rising in that way, where those that have found a level of peace within themselves are able to like pour forth that fountain. And there's a lot of thirsty people in this time, so let's drink to that.
Powerful that I just wanted to say it's powerful that you felt that you were moved so deeply and you were watching a video. And so you were brought into that field even through a screen, through a video.
Right.
You didn't even have to be in that space. That's how powerful and potent that field was. Just wanted to name that. That's pretty incredible. Sorry, Patrick, I took you over there. Go ahead.
No, I love that. I've just given some praise for that story and just feeling the resonance of the collective coming into coherence, and how deeply that moves us. And there's something in us that knows that feels the intimacy of those, those shared vibrations. And appreciate that story. I can jump in since I've got the attention. The first story of peace, Tay, that came to my mind when you cued this is I had the sweet privilege of a breathwave session with a man last evening who I've been getting to know and working with over the past couple months. And he is at this place in his journey and his awareness of the trauma and the unaddressed fear within him that keeps showing up in his life, in spite of how successful and achievable his life has been. And he's coming to terms, with those limitations within himself. And after our breath session, it was a really difficult one for him. There's a lot of over efforting and a lot of resistance that was coming up in his breath experience. And he's practiced in this, in this modality, and was just feeling defeated and still, responding to the cues to just keep coming back to the basics, keep coming back to this simplicity of the connected breath. And he really was exhausted by the end of like 45 minutes and curled over into a fetal position at the end and just started to come into his feeling, come into his heart, surrendering to the fact that like this isn't gonna change by trying to force anything or fix anything. And it was in that moment of really just letting go and surrendering that his heart opened. He was able to start to breathe in a really spontaneous and nurturing way for himself. And this song came on right in that moment from our playlist. That's just this really sweet lullaby of a woman's voice saying, "I love you. Oh, I love you. Oh, I love you." It's S.E. Jane's song. And just cracked him wide open and took him right back to that part within his life that was before trauma and that was just so sweet and simple and whole. And he just got to cry those tears and came out with, that mix between the laughter and the crying, and just looks right at me. He's like, "Man, I love you. I love you so much. Can I give you a hug?" Just these really sweet moments, that are like those apex, like gifts of a shared process of healing, and just how pure and how simple it was that he's like, it nothing needs to change. I can't change what happened. And it was just this simple realization of how good it felt to make peace with himself, make peace with that aspect of his life. So it was just a really sweet way to end our sessions yesterday. And Yeah, giving thanks for that brother and the way he's been showing up. And yeah.
Beautiful, Patrick.
Mm-hmm.
How about you, Thomas?
There's a story, and it's not compelling enough to take a couple minutes, Tay. So I want to kick it to you and keep the current moving a little bit.
Okay.
Like I can answer the question, and I'm like, I want to follow the aliveness, and so I want to give it to you, and then see what kind of undulates out of that.
I respect that. Yeah. I'm thinking about how I was involved in the greatest act of civil disobedience in Canada to date, where many thousands of Canadian citizens stood up against the military-industrial complex of Canada and international to protect one of the last remaining watersheds in the ancient temperate rainforest on Vancouver Island. And so like 98% of this forest has been clear-cut logged at some point. And so there's just this tiny sliver left, really. And one of these areas that's been untouched until this time in 2020 was set to be cut. And people stood up and said, no more. And like I said, many thousands of citizens, I mean, maybe tens of thousands throughout the whole time showed up in peace to protest. And it got really heated at some point as the logging company kept losing money from being stalled. The Canadian government then funded the military and the RCMP to come into that area and start extracting people, arresting people. And, it just kept getting more and more intense. And it actually got very violent. And many people were very abused by the military, by the RCMP, by the logging companies. Some people were physically injured. I was a part of the first group that was pepper sprayed and run over by cop cars and things like that in the night. Camps would be raided with military people who had automatic weapons pointed at peaceful people in the night, tearing them out of their tents at night. And so I'm trying to kind of set the stage that it got very violent at some point. But the people remained so peaceful. There was the oddball person that would kind of go off, but for the most part, the people were incredibly peaceful. They kept bringing it back to the heart, to the love. We're here for the love of the forests. We're here for the love of these ancient ones. And the protests so often had to do with art and beauty. Creating like kind of art installations and the ways in which we would impede industry. They were very complex and kind of artistic ways of impeding industry and RCMP from extracting us, to stall the process. And I was brought to tears many times throughout that summer by the heart in people and the willingness to be peaceful, even as they're witnessing their friends and loved ones get beat and battered, arrested. I was sent to prison that summer because of that. Like it was really far out how far they took it, that the people remain peaceful. So I wanted to share that because this is one kind of seemingly isolated time of protest, standing up against military-industrial complex, but it shows this pattern of aggression, of industry, and the violence of corporations and nation states against people, and how often people meet these entities with peace, and how incredible that is. And I think it's because the people are moved by love. There's anger and there's rage there, but they're really moved by the love for the land or the love for whatever it is they're protecting. And yeah, so I thought that would be,
Mm.
you know, a nice little thread to weave into this.
Mm.
Mhm.
Thank you, Tay. Yeah, that catches something for me, and I want to thank you for your service in that way. Like, I think all of us in our own ways have been on some front lines defending what needs defending at times, and like I know the vulnerability of that. Especially for those of us that come from privilege, whether it's how tall we are or biology, but like to put ourselves on the front lines where it's like, whoa, this is what it's like for people on the margins all the fucking time, right? So I want to honor that. And something that hooked as you were speaking, and I think it was Mother Teresa, and she would say, I will never go to an anti-war rally, but I will always be at the peace rally, right? And so as you tell this story and you talk about like, yeah, the AK-47 with like the barrel of the rifle pointed at the edge of your temple. And it's like, how in that moment, right? Or you want to zoom out to what's happening at a collective level right now in terms of the uncertainty and the collapse and the upheaval. It's like, how in that moment do we find an anchor, right? How in that moment do we find an anchor? And if our only anchor is resistance to the force of the empire or to the enemy, there's nothing strong enough to keep us in center in that place. But if our orientation in that moment is to the love of those last big old trees, or to the love of that last clean water that runs down the mountainside, or to the love of those brown children that are being killed in their sleep by these bombs funded by taxpayer dollars. Like if our love is there, it gives us an anchor to hold peace. And so something that as I listen to you that's distilling in me is, and it's exactly that quote that you brought in through Thich Nhat Hanh, peace is not a state that we are reaching for. It's not something we are stepping to. It's something that we are inhabiting in this very, very moment, right? And it's that choice to inhabit that then allows us to meet whatever life may bring with that resonance and almost even that protection, right? It's almost like a protection that comes when we're anchored in that place. And so I'm tracking in the field, and as we think about men and we think about the ways that we try to grow, right? There's somewhere to get, and there's something to bring in that we don't already have. And I think the trip of peace as this really deep, steady undercurrent is that it's a choice to be with it right now or it's not here. It's a choice to be with it right now or it's not here. And there's no way to go get it, right? There's no way to do enough work to go get it. It's like amongst all of it, even with all of the shame I carry, all of the shadows still inside of me, all of the ways I still hurt people, can I abide in peace? Can I connect myself with that great natural current that Patrick talks about, right? That's great natural peace. Can I align with that such that it can inform everything I do in the world? And that to me, as you all share your stories and we talk about peace, is it was a choice before the outcome was even on the table to inhabit peace. And that's what shaped the outcome. And that to me is this deep, deep, deep well that we get to drink from when we talk about peace. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. I love how profoundly simple and in some ways obvious that truth is, Thomas, that you're sharing, of like, it's either now or it's, there's no separation actually from that great natural peace, though we think there is, that's the conundrum. And I just appreciate how fully and energetically you embody that orientation and that truth. It gives permission immediately to start to operate from that deeper space within myself that agrees on a fundamental level that, yeah, I am at peace amidst the turmoil. There is this heart that always wants to come into loving coherence with reality, and that loving coherence shapes reality towards that deeper truth. I just feel that momentum that's created just by expressing that.
Brings me into a little reflection of just those alchemizing forces, those alchemizing energetics, of essentially love and fear, and where fear that is focused around division kind of feeds off more further division, and love is like the glue that kind of hearkens us and beckons us towards that unity consciousness space and the interconnectedness of all beings. And nature can be fierce as well, of course, but there is a deeper relatedness at play. And just as you were sharing, Tay, your journey there up in BC, and that love, that deep relationship with that tree and with the rocks and with that complete system that is still intact, in a fragment. It's like the love for that is what beckoned the people to be there. And and then as you described, those forces that are trying to just divide, like pull the people back and separate the people, and that energetic of love that like, as much as we can, and like Thomas and Patrick were sharing, just kind of enlivening that in our daily walk, enlivening that in our families and communities, and holding that prayer for all of humanity to taste the liberation of that space, and be guided by that.
Yeah. I'm thinking about how important stories are, and that these stories of, like, what's his name? Tyson Yunkaporta wrote a book called Right Story, Wrong Story. And I'm not going to summarize it right now, but one of the central themes of that is that how do you know when a story's right or wrong, And he suggests that a right story is life affirming, that it brings life together, it generates coherence and generativity, that there's allurement in it. And a wrong story is that separates, that divides. And it's fascinating to contemplate the context that we're having this conversation in, which is that the overculture of the West tends to be one of individualism. It tends to be one of separation from each other, from nature. I know that we're all involved in sub-communities that are aiming to dismantle that story and the stories connected to that and rewrite new ones. And so this is what my trying to craft a question around this right now for us to contemplate. In terms of masculinity too, there's embedded in that story of individualism, there's a sense of like, we need to attain things. We're outcome oriented, goal oriented, even control oriented. And so then I could imagine that kind of orientation could seep into this sense of attaining peace, reaching this destination of peacefulness. And Thomas, like you're saying, and we're all mentioning our own way, and how both Gandhi and Thich Nhat Hanh spoke to the fact that it's not something to reach, it's here. And so what are some stories around masculinity and connected to our culture in general that can begin to allow us to kind of seep into the cracks, to kind of go beyond the fringes and begin to inhabit peace in creative and maybe non-conventional ways, while also understanding that it's here now. Is that clear? Clear enough? I see nods. So if anyone is inspired to pick that up, it'd be great.
I'm catching a thread, Tay, from both from the BC Bear Creek blockade, like that story in the context of the right story and the wrong story. And you were speaking to the artists. There was something beautiful and valuable that was happening in that space, and the protests were beauty, and exalting that peace. And I think of until we, in the context of masculinity, of course, both for men and for women, until we have an experience of our effort and what we're wanting to penetrate the world with, until we feel like a fundamental rightness just about our story, our being, which of course includes pain. There might be trauma, there might be displacement. All of these aspects of our story end up being that call or the search for reconciliation with ourselves, or having the experience of a story deeper than the one that, you know, is getting us confused and in a space of frustration or anger and hate, and then bringing that out into, you know, into our relationships. How valuable it is once we get to the point of actually feeling that through line and that thread within our own lives that allow us to, you know, to surrender to, wow, even though I wouldn't have wanted to call that in, that pain or that divorce or that, you know, the loss or the grief of a relationship. It's like, now I actually see what's happening on the soul level, and something about that is nourishing and allows me to come forward with that presence that Thomas was speaking about. There's like, of course, it's not going to be, you know, quote unquote, passive or passive experience here on earth. It's a wild space. You know, like I think of Avatar, you know, the movie, when we were speaking about that, is like, there's this connection to the world tree, and there's, you know, there's the beauty and the coherence with the earth. And so until there's a story like that that we feel in our bones, we do have a sense of separation from that. We aren't quite at coherence with that deep part of our nature. And so, yeah, I just appreciated that. The way that if you don't have that, the wrong story seems to agree, you know, with our experience. It's like, you're right, this is hard, it is difficult. And we do start to lose hope, and we do buy into the narratives of like nihilism and just giving up hope. And it's like, there is no meaning to all of this. And that ultimately is going to express as pain and as division between us. But once we come back to something more central, there's the basis within our own story to contribute to the collective and, you know, greater ecological story that mirrors that beauty back to us that we're starting to feel in ourselves.
Patrick, as you share, I'm like, the inertia is actually towards residing in that peace. The inertia is towards residing in that peace. And there is so much that has been put in the way that we have to uphold, or that the system is upholding, for us to avoid just falling into that place of peace. And I think when we talk about men and the story of masculinity that we know it now, and the efforting is actually so counter to that. And that's what I think Breathwave really shows. Like, it's the stripping away, the dropping, the stopping to try, and then, oh, once all of that's gone, I'm just here. And so when we talk about this word peace and this conversation, I'm seeing it as kind of like almost this well and I'm almost seeing the well with like Yeshua and who does he meet at the well? The
Samaritan.
The Samaritan, right? Yeah, it's like that type of scene, right? And it's like this well of peace resides in all of us, right? And it's right there, and it's actually accessible. And the amount that we're kept spinning to avoid knowing that is there, and the way that we are ensnared in distraction and turned away from that peace that is there, it's like it's just a falling into the well. Can I let myself just fall into the well? And how much of our own narratives and attempts at growth and self-development are actually the continued spinning away from the well, or the continued like running away from the well when the well is just sitting here for us to abide in. And so as you shared, that's something that struck as like, oh, well, the inertia is towards the great natural order of things, right? Like the same intelligence that's growing the soils in the forests, right? That's bringing the rain down, that's moving the rain from the Amazon all the way to Australia. Like, that is the same intelligence, which is this great natural peace within us. It's the exact same thing, but there's this trip in our agency and our free will as humans that we can avoid that, or we can disassociate from that, or we can disconnect from that. Where really nothing else in nature has the ability to do that, unless it's a deeply maladaptive strategy, right? And yet we have the ability to do that, to keep turning away from the well that's just sitting there waiting to nourish us. It's like, noting that. Yeah.
Seems like orienting toward the beautiful is important. And in orienting toward the beautiful, you can't turn away from the so-called ugly or painful. And it's making me think how important it is to, like, what is the warrior's role in peace? I would suggest that a peaceful warrior is a warrior that's poetical. Like the warrior poet is the one that can be peaceful. And, you know, poets are oriented toward the beautiful. And so then they're also willing to be with the painful. And I'm thinking about clear cuts because it got brought up earlier. And I've sat in these clear cuts in the Pacific Northwest, and it's difficult to be peaceful sitting in a hot, dry, desertified, dead zone that did not need to happen. You know, to feel peaceful in that moment. So, but it's possible, I think. But I think what's really powerful about that moment for someone like me, who's not super evolved or enlightened, is how painful it is and how much grief I feel, and that I can sense that something beautiful was there and that something beautiful could be there. And so then that makes me want to take action, to kind of rise up like a warrior and take action, you know, but also to weep, to cry, to feel, to get lost in the poetry of it. So I'm just kind of bringing these pieces together to see if it inspires anything in either of you. This kind of balance of like grief, pain, dark, light, that to be peaceful isn't to turn away from the ugly, that it's to like wrap it up in your heart cloth and let it inspire you to create beauty, maybe.
Yeah, something I'm feeling inherent in that language is paradox. You know, that okay, so this beauty and this knowledge of what could be here in this clear-cut forest, like the attunement to that knowing orients us towards an action that restores the wholeness in the space, which includes grief, which includes that knowledge of beauty. So just the capacity to hold paradox and to be in those opposites is central if we're going to be cultivators of peace. And I think of I heard this definition from a rabbi of shalom, which we might translate as peace, but he offered that shalom is the wholeness that holds opposites, which feels like a really deep and practical orientation towards peace because of the current circumstance, and yet the inward knowing that there's a way of being at home in the world and at home with myself, that in spite of the pull or the gravity, you know, of the pain or the grief or the beauty and the hope, if we go too far one way, we miss the reality that's actually right there, you know, like at the ocean meeting the shoreline. It's like it's in that space that the peace is actually present and cultivated. Yeah.
So I'd love to turn our gaze toward your event that you three are running in a moment here. But I'm getting caught up on this idea of warriorhood, and like, what does action and right action mean in the name of peace, in the face of violence, in the face of aggression? Can aggression be peaceful? I'd love to just kind of untangle that a little bit, hear your perspectives on that, because I don't know. Maybe this is part of my evolutionary process, but I'm finding it difficult to feel like peace is always peaceful in the sense of like calm, accepting, surrendered, and passive. That maybe peace can also be active, action oriented. You know what I mean?
correcting reality towards that greater wholeness. So if there's harm that's being done, the knowledge that this anger that I feel is coming from a knowledge of the peace and the beauty that could be. And so the action that comes out of that, which might be, to step in and shift the direction or that collective current that is contributing, say, to the clear cut, or what that is like, there's an art form there of how that action, and use the word aggression, but like just the entry point to like kind of correct the momentum into something that's more coherent seems like the dance and the art that you're speaking to. So I appreciate that like it won't just be easeful all the time necessarily, but in the effort to push through the resistance, whatever that looks like, is that coming from a knowledge of the greater integrity that somewhere in us, we know there's that story of value. We know what it feels like to be in love and in resonance with it. If it's not coming from that, it's a risk that we're taking to show up. But if we're coming from that deeper coherence, that law of entrainment of bringing those lower vibrations up into resonance with that greater, harmony, seems to be like seeing those limitations, that are contributing to the harm start to come up into the reality of that greater knowing.
I want to add there, Patrick, as you talk about where it's coming from, and Tay, something that I'm tracking, because I can feel you sitting in that forest in the clear cut, and I know myself in those spaces, and I know the amount of anger and rage that's smoldering inside of me, and it takes every bit of self-restraint to not become violent, right? Like, I know that so well. That's how fire moves in me. Like, it just wants to lash out at injustice. And for me, peace doesn't mean that there isn't an act of physical harm upon another. It doesn't mean that we may never have to pick up a gun. It's not those things. I don't associate peace with nonviolence so much, right? To me, it's a peaceful action if there comes a humble and deep understanding of the person who we are witnessing do the violence. So another way put, like, if I do choose to stand up, if I do choose to resist, if I do choose to allow that fire to move through me, is it coming from a place of deep compassion for the role that other person is playing? Or am I taking action based upon that person being the enemy? Because if they're the enemy and they're wrong and they're bad, I'm perpetuating the cycle of violence, right? But if I can look and say, I have so much compassion for you, the logger, doing what you've done for 200 years. You're trying to feed your family. I have compassion for how you are also on the other side of this industrial complex. From that place, I'm going to stand up and put my body on the line. From that place, I'm going to push back when you're harming the women and children, but it's still coming from peace. So it's an active peace, but inside of me, I'm aligned with that coherent, natural order of life, and I'm acting from that place. And that to me is like, fuck, man, it's hard. Like, such a delicate line is being men right now, because how much have we abused the warrior? 98% of expressions of the warrior these days are to violate life, right? That's what we've inherited. But this tiny fraction that's still around, that's like, no, the warrior protects life and he does it from a place of peace. But to know when action is necessary, to know when even physical action is necessary, but to allow it to come from this place of deep compassion and understanding for the situation at hand, right? It's almost matter of fact that we show up of like, hey, no, you're not going to touch the women like that. Hey, no, you're not going to treat the children like that. I will put my life on the line. I will put your life on the line to protect the children right now. But it's coming from this really clear place inside of me.
Well said. How about you, Murray? I'd love to hear from you on this. If you feel inspired.
I've just been, really drinking from the articulations and feeling a lot of resonance in everything that's been shared here. And I think all that we can access as individuals is how deep have we been cradled within the peace, and when we're surrounded by an old growth forest and we feel just what that is to be expressing, to be expressed by life, to be sort of lived by life in that way, and to feel the opportunity that, I mean, we are as a part of nature as any tree or any mountain, and yet through the cultural paradigms that we've built over this time, there is a sense of separation. And I think that's why we can access a deeper state of peace by being in deep nature. You can go sit by the river and just like, or in the middle of the city, you suddenly end up wandering through a park, and there's a sense. And I love that question that you posed, of like, where does the warrior raise a sword on behalf of peace, and such a fine, nuanced edge is in that sword, and I feel like we are all, speaking on behalf of the 4 men on this call, and many others who might receive what we're sharing in this moment at another moment, it's like we are all honing that edge, like we're polishing our beings as best we can, and we stumble and we lash out, and we act from fear as well. And but those beacons, those beings like Thich Nhat Hanh and other deeper embodied beings of active peace. And I think that's an important term, is like Thomas was sharing, it's not just like like the world is perfect, and that's the spiritual plane that we can access in order to then be in the physical plane, be in the masculine, and be in the active role of peace, and become agents of change. And we've touched on this theme a few times, of the when we got the backing of life, when we have a certain allyship, which is essentially then that's the enlivened warrior of love. There's a warrior standing there, but the heart is open. The shield is in place, but there's an allyship with life. There's a knowingness of one's role in like magnificent humility. There's an awareness of other. There's an awareness of a deeper weave in the tapestry that transcends the immediate conflict. And similarly, like we could think about a lioness, and a lioness with her cubs, and she's just like this giant, like beating heart of the matriarch, and she's deep, like just deep pool of peace, and yet if another predator or some danger comes, like she'll, like, the power that is aligned with that force of love, and the pool ocean of love. So in that, I know that many of us in this time, as we like the vision widens, the perspective widens, and we are being called to inhabit such a deep capacity. We wake up in the morning, and it's there. We can see the news. We can see what's taking place. We can see the fractures in our species, and the disconnect that humanity has built from all of our other relations. And to walk with that, and to continue to show up with a sense of courage, and to access, I think that's really what we're doing through the the resuscitating of a sense of global village, and a sense of interconnectedness, is we're reestablishing a silent voice of belonging, and a silent song of like beckoning each other and beckoning ourselves forward towards a new iteration of that one-heartedness that can know and stand in such a way that cradles beauty. Yeah.
Preach.
Beautiful share. Thank you. Yeah. I love that sense of being beckoned, being called forth. Yeah. Let's talk about your event. But I want to share this very short story that I think it's only a couple paragraphs. I think it's an interesting exemplar of what we were just talking about in terms of the warrior role in cultivating peace. And so it's a traditional Zen Buddhist story. A big tough samurai once went to see a little monk. Monk, he said in a voice accustomed to instant obedience, teach me about heaven and hell. The monk looked up at this mighty warrior and replied with utter disdain, teach you about heaven and hell? I couldn't teach you about anything. You're dirty, you smell, your blade is rusty, you're a disgrace, an embarrassment to the samurai class. Get out of my sight. I can't stand you. The samurai was furious. He shook, got all red in the face, was speechless with rage. He pulled out his sword and raised it above him, preparing to slay the monk. That's hell, said the monk softly. The samurai was overwhelmed. The compassion and surrender of this little man who had offered his life to give this teaching, to show him hell. He slowly put down his sword, filled with gratitude, and suddenly very peaceful. And that is heaven, said the monk softly.
Mm.
That restorative justice orientation.
Beautiful.
All right, so you three are hosting an event in North Carolina in April, and there will be links to that in the show notes and whatnot. But let's talk about what seeded this event. Which are you calling it? Men's Prayer for Peace. Okay, so let's talk about the germination of that seed and how you imagine it coming to grow and bloom as you gather together in April.
Yeah. So something that's feeling really clear to me as I continue to drop into the why. And it's these two circles and they're meeting in the middle. And the first is, Murray, Patrick, and I all have access to these pretty incredible technologies that have just been gifted to us or through us in our life. And that's the way Murray is with sound and voice and artistry. And that's the way Patrick is with this modality of breath. And that's what's coming through me with the circle and with brotherhood. And when I look at our world, I see these gifts as if they were buried in the earth and given to us for these times, right? These really simple medicines, things that we all have access to: sound, breath, connection. And it's like we're in this endless spiral of trying to utilize those to feel a little bit better about ourselves, right? To feel a little bit better about ourselves. And part of the crux of this gathering is what happens if we use these technologies in service to the flourishing of life? What if we bring together these medicine bundles that come from these deep places in the earth, we put them on the altar and we say, we're taking this medicine in service to peace, not in service to more income, not in service to better sex, not in service to a better looking partner or better looking partners, but in service to peace, And so that's a big piece of it, like we're bringing out these medicines in service to something bigger than ourselves. And concurrent to that is I do not believe that our soul stretches into the full expression of our being when we're focused on the development of the self. I know in my own life that when a call comes to be in service to life and I choose to answer that call, the growth that comes through me is tenfold any growth that would come if I were sitting by myself trying to develop my own being, because life fucking needs something and it's calling me forth. And so to answer that call, I have to grow and inhabit more spaces myself in ways that I wouldn't have to in the absence of that call. So partially what we're doing is we're looking at these 22 men in this gathering and we're saying, what would it take for the world to be at peace? And if you're going to come sit in this circle to talk about what it would take for the world to be at peace, peace is going to have to come through you, brother. And the way that peace is going to have to come through you is probably going to be more powerful than if you just sat down for 5 days to try to work on yourself. So that's some of the waters we're coming from, right? That's some of the waters we're coming from. And I'll kick it to Patrick and Murray to build on that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for kicking us off. And yeah, just in your language, Thomas, I'm hearing there's almost like when you get to that point in your life where you realize the way that you've been doing things is just not going to get you any further, you know, and there's a frustration that's there. That would be a time maybe classically that you would go through an initiation or rite of passage. Maybe you go on a vision quest, you go sit on a hill or go into silence and you start to contact that place in yourself, you know, that is obscured by all of the things you've been focusing your attention and your effort on. And then something new, you're crying out for that vision. The men's prayer for peace is like a communal cry out for that vision with the earth, from the earth, with these rituals and technologies of circle to receive through our collective a vision and a prayer that we can express with our lives now that exemplifies and contributes to that prayer for peace. You know, I think of that, like how rare it is for an individual to get to that point in their life where they're willing to take a week out of their flow to just go do nothing, you know, or to go receive a prayer, like to work on themselves. It's rare that that's going to happen. And how many times you know, has a man come for the purpose, like you're saying, of actually, this isn't about me. I'm stirred by I'm stirred by the war. I'm stirred by the abuse. I'm stirred by the pain of all these things. And I'm putting my life on the line now in a proactive way to tap in to this prayer. I want to know what this feels like. And I want to practice expressing this in a way that lifts me beyond that delusion or just the fixation on the self. And so I do see that piece as a central image to what we're doing, and to speak as well briefly to the development of the self, because that's vocationally where I spend most of my time, is with one-on-one clients. And I see that if we as individuals don't feel ourselves as a real ingredient in the whole, there's this shrinking away, there's this shriveled participation, because we haven't awoken that part within us that feels soulful and feels like the warrior that picks up the sword. It's like, I'm meant to be here. And so that deep soul contact, I think, is connected to peace work. Soul work and peace work start to coalesce in this thing of, I know why I'm here. I feel myself as a real ingredient in this. And so the gift of deepening in ritual and circle with brothers and with the ceremony of breath, particularly speaking about the breath piece, is that there's so much unconscious resistance just in our effort to connect our breath without a pause, that brings us right up into conscious connection with the resistance within us, emotionally, physiologically, that keeps us from feeling safe to expand into that fire that Thomas is speaking about. So that comes up every time ritualistically as we start to connect with the respiratory system, and we see the way that these conditionings and these traumas are encoded, not just in our DNA, but also within, the rhythm of our breath. And so we start to awaken this and liberate that life force and come into the coherence, not just of what does this mean for me and my story, but what does this mean for peace?
Wow. Beautifully articulated. Yeah, gathering our pieces of peace, bringing them together to explore the new horizon of our individual anchorage, our individual expression of peace, and to experience and witness in a circle of men how that sets a new trajectory how that informs us in such a way that we step forward into the world in a different way. And Thomas touched on the technologies, these ancient simple and also masterful kind of ways of being together. And the circle being the only shape that has one side or no sides, so we a lot of the kind of the sense and the ethos that we're the invitation that's there for this time that we're going to be together in April, the States over there, is is to gather in a circle and to behold that space in that space, that collective field in the middle of us all, in the middle of all of life, and to relate to that in new ways, to be with the fire, to be with the inner fire. And for any listeners who haven't sort of brushed up against my particular work, I've been very, very passionate about carrying song and carrying music and the kind of the coding of harmony that comes through the audio realm and the auditory realm. And there's just there's beautiful practices that we're holding in our bundles that are excited to kind of share in a new way, and practices that inform through the elemental intelligence of how we can curate ourselves and curate this pathway of peace in harmonic ways. The crossover between sound and peace is beautiful, because it's like we've so many times in this conversation we've touched on resonance and harmony, and so these using sound waves to really feel and experience where we meet, where is the tension. In that moment we're sitting in a clear cut, there's tension, and can we cultivate a little broader toolkit, so we're kind of going to be gathering together to explore what tools we have and how we can hone them a little deeper. And I'm excited to be with Patrick and Thomas and to jump in on this. And we touched on that thing of like, there's a call, there's a beckoning, and these two brothers threw out a line all the way to Australia with a really strong, open-hearted call, and it's been it's already been such a powerful trinity working with these guys. So exciting to be a part.
So breath, sound, movement, ritual. This isn't an intellectual pursuit, a way of wrangling peace with the thinking mind, but a way of embodying and expressing and living peace through the portal of the body, shared resonance and coherence. Is that what I'm hearing?
And we're in a collaboration with the mystery, like this. We're gonna have a nicely formulated sketch pad of what we're going to be engaging in, and part of the organic process of gathering with a circle of men is like, who arrives and what is the active prayer from that moment forward. What is the resonance in the field when we're there, and then we can bring forth, it's like a flower. This sounds like it is going to be an important threshold, not only for those who participate, but for you too, you three, and it could be a really transformative threshold. And I'm reminded of how John O'Donohue talks about the importance of how we approach thresholds. In
And he suggests that one of the better ways to approach a meaningful and transformative threshold is with reverence for the mystery. But I'd like to hear from you three. I mean, I'm sure listeners have gathered throughout our conversation, but how are you approaching this as individuals? How are you actively orienting toward this threshold that you're cultivating, co-creating together?
I can grab the talking stick, the back to this idea of paradox, two truths, that coexist to create an even larger truth. In as it regards to the thresholds, hey, I think you really spoke to what you recognized in looking at the men's prayer for peace. Information was this isn't just like a philosophical approach to peace where we eat good food and get to just lounge and do this. This is something we want to feel in our bones. It's something that we know that there's inherited resistance within us to really comfortably step into it. So we know that there is a threshold and an initiation, and rather than that just being we have this like prescribed way of stepping into peace, there's a self-initiation that's required. And so we know to some degree that the men that come and circle around this fire with us and join us in this prayer are already recognizing something within themselves, that they're not satisfied just doing this on their own. They're not just wanting to cultivate and develop more skill within the healing arts or within their music artistry and such. It's like coming out of that, or like with Murray in this case, like kind of stepping down off the stage and saying, all of my artistry is in service of this collective prayer, and it's about what we can bring through. And so the invitation and that initiation is profound. It's simple to start to come into relationship with resonance of sound, or to come into conscious connection with your breath in a new way, or experience your part in the circle. But when these technologies come with that container and the conscious intention to be a conduit for peace, this is the threshold. And the image I get, Tabe, from what you were bringing with the clear-cut forest is we're living in a clear-cut forest right now. That moves us because we're already feeling the ways that our lives and our attention are being pillaged from us. We're our attention is being harvested through social media, and we know that we're feeling weak. We know that we're feeling distracted, and we're in that barren land right now. So for those that are feeling that call, what do you do? How are you going to take that seriously and step into a new resonance? And so I have that feeling of, it's not go look for the clear cut, you're in it, and will you join the fire? Yeah.
Beautiful, PP.
Thank you.
I just want to touch in again on the active prayer, and Tay, yeah, that question you posed, of how are we kind of aligning with this thread of the gathering to come, and I could feel just like the spaciousness that arrived in in the field then, particularly for us three that were posed the question, and that's so indicative for me of that threshold that you speak of. It's like how do we engage in the moment? And sometimes we recognize that space is needed, so there's like a where our inner feminine gets on board and is like, let me not just respond off the cuff. Let me just step back a little and feel. Let me access my authenticity and when words arrive, it's more in alliance with the resonance that I'm hearkening and beckoning myself and others towards. And so, in that active prayer, I think there's even us three as the in the role of facilitators, we're in a deep listening, we're in a deep receptivity to what's taking place and how do I respond. And so that for me is as on this day, sitting here in Australia, that is enlivened in me and awake in me. And I feel that is, well, it's also deep being in the present of the moment. It's also like that casting forth of, like, in the beginning of April, we'll be in the flesh, we'll be in the Appalachian mountains, we'll be together to explore that threshold in the physical, with some more dynamism and kind of but yeah, keeping that broad holding, because really that energy of peace is cradling ourselves and the other. I love that expression of holding someone accountable when you're standing there with a logger or someone with a weapon who's representing that division and fear. And to hold that person accountable means I need to hold them. I need to be accessing that, like the hug, it's like I need to be accessing that compassion for that man or woman. And I need to be like, wow, you've been co-opted on a deep level that I can access, and you might not be able to see it, but I have a deeper vision because I've taken the time to broaden, and so the active prayer of peace is kind of lived from this moment, and then we can enliven our hope for this world from that place. And I think that's really the key for things. Notions such as hope for the future is when I access my own deep peace, I know peace is alive in this world because I can feel it within, and that really is the only place in which we can truly enliven that field on the external.
I just want to respond to something you said, Mary, that like seeing the men's prayer for peace and these days together in the Appalachian Mountains as that stepping back, as that, I don't just want to be a part of the noise. I want something new to come from a cultivated silence that contributes to that and, contributes to the peace I want to feel and see in the world. I think of just an example of prayer, or definitions of prayer. That word is loaded. We haven't even touched too much. What do we mean by prayer? Is it associated with a particular lineage of prayer or what? And there's a quote I really love by an indigenous Sioux elder back in the 1800s, by Ohiesa is his name, and he says that prayer is the recognition of the unseen and eternal nature of things. Prayer is the recognition of the unseen and eternal nature of things. And an example I think of with that is everything you love, you lose someday. That's just a recognition of the eternal nature of life on earth. Is like, just so you know, everything you're all so caught up in, it's like that too gets composted. And so to take a step back and to really feel that, and to feel that loss, and to recognize, actually, I might already be living in a way that's afraid of what I already lost. Like that's already happened to me, and I haven't processed that. I haven't felt that. I haven't been with brothers in that. So this is an example of the sort of prayer and recognition that we come into, together is that as we clear those old holding patterns, we find ourselves in the circle, we find ourselves in peace, we find ourselves in prayer, which is that resonance with reality.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Mary, for giving that, that another pass around the warrior's way, and that ability to step back before you step back in. Absolutely. That's what I see us doing.
I appreciate you bringing in Oyesa there. I was just reading him recently, like last week. He's profound, his teachings. And I have a little paragraph here where he's talking about the power of silence, because you mentioned silence there at the beginning too. And it seems like silence and peace are sisters, that they come together in a way, cultivating silence. And that doesn't mean void of sound, but an inner silence is necessary if one's to really welcome peace into their lives. And so Oyesa says, we believe profoundly in silence, the sign of a perfect equilibrium. Silence is the absolute poise or balance of body, mind, and spirit. Those who can preserve their selfhood, ever calm and unshaken by the storms of existence, not a leaf, as it were, astir on the tree, not a ripple upon the shining pool. Those in the mind of the person of nature possess the ideal attitude and conduct of life. If you ask us, what is silence? We will answer, it is the great mystery. The holy silence is God's voice. If you ask, what are the fruits of silence? We will answer, they are self-control, true courage or endurance, patience, dignity, peace, and reverence. Silence is the cornerstone of character.
The samurai.
So beautifully said. Yeah, thank you. Just one other little brief thread I wanted to touch on, in that silence is it's taking a breath on the battlefield. It's like when you're in the fray, and we are in the fray. Like let's not convince ourselves otherwise. These are powerful times, and these are our times. We're here, incarnated amongst the soup, and that stepping back for a moment, and taking stock, is like, it's I just got the vision there of the ashram. It's like when you're on the super highway, or the highway 1 or whatever it is, and there's that little rest stop, that little pullover. That's the ashram. That's the breath on the battlefield. But you can just kind of orient in a different way, and get a sense of where and how we're allied in this world, and take a little food from that, and a little, that's beautiful what you shared, that the two sisters, peace and silence, and to allow, and I would say particularly as masculine, as men in this time, to really invite and allow a little more of that spaciousness in our being, in order to step forward again with a new perspective.
I want to move us towards close, guys, because we have a host of friends coming over for dinner, and I got to get the hearth lit. Cabin's cold.
Yeah.
I want it to be nice and cozy. And something I want to say in that is, I was talking to one of my best friends the other day. There's a couple of my closest guy friends who are going to be in the space. And I was like, if I could pick any 5 days, if I were to be dying, or I just wanted the 5 best days of the year, I would probably shape this gathering. Like we'd be eating this food, we'd be sleeping in this place, we'd be swimming in this creek, we'd be hiking in this forest. I would bring in my brother Patrick to do breath. He'd carry such a clear, strong medicine. I would bring in Murray's music because it's one of my favorite musicians. Like this is the gathering that I want to go to, right? And I'm having that moment as I listen to you all of like, yeah, I can share and profound things come through my being. And also like I could sit and listen to the two of you and the texture of the medicine that comes through the life that you've cultivated, you know? And so I'm closing with like an innocent excitement. I'm like, oh, fuck, I get to do these sessions with Murray. I get to breathe with Patrick, you know, like that I get to receive in that way. And feeling the strength of what comes through both of you and the preciseness and the timeliness too for these specific times on earth. So yeah, I'm closing with like a warmth as I tune into the gathering and the fire underneath the stars. And these are the best stars in the world that I found in these mountains because there's so little light in big cities, like, and feeling us around the fire under the stars and being like, oh, whoa, that's a pretty damn nourishing space, yo. Yeah.
Okay.
I got to reflect something back before we close to Thomas. You know, one of the gifts I feel that you bring within your cultivated presence with brothers is the beautiful way that you see and recognize the things that we bring to the circle. And I can just testify to how good it has felt being in this working process with you around Men's Prayer for Peace, that your like will is strong, you're willing to show up and do the work. And there's this spaciousness and this seeing, this affirmation that calls those invisible traits that I know are there within me, but it still feels so good to have them seen, you know, and spoken to, and how good of a medicine that is to experience amongst brothers. That's like, there's not competition here. It's like we're stronger together, and you lead the charge in that in such a good way. So I'm just wanting to make sure you don't get away with not having your medicine present, because those rituals and the circle and the brotherhood that's the gift. It's like recognizing that we're welcome in the circle. Yeah. So thank you for bringing that.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we're bringing it to a close. I want to close with a quote, if I can.
Tay, before you kick us off officially, are you going to join us?
Oh, I wish. That would be lovely. It's in April.
It's in April.
I'd have to drive there, you know.
Yeah, man,
I will be in the United States. I'll be in Colorado. Well, that was the plan around that time. I'd have to drive to North Carolina. Let's talk about it after this.
Cool.
Yeah, is there anything else that wants to be said about any of this before we close officially?
As long as Tay is there, I'm pumped. So I'm good to close. Now that we all know that Tay's driving from Colorado, I'm good to close.
I love that. Thanks.
Yeah, just that we're officially welcoming this, and we know that those that are listening to this and those that are feeling the call know that this is an opportunity to show up for themselves and make this threshold step forward with the work and the medicine and the relations they're already cultivating. We know that this is a moment for us to just look around the circle and to stoke the fire and carry this peace torch with us. And yeah, that's the simple call, is that it's open, and, you know, reach out to us and talk with us. We're happy to answer your questions, but we look forward to seeing you around the fire.
I'll put an asterisk that by the time this gets out, we do anticipate, we're just welcoming an intimate group of men, and we do anticipate it filling, given the intimate nature. And so by the time this is out, if this is resonating, get on the site, get to the enrollment form, because I imagine it'll be a couple weeks from this moment. If you're supposed to be at the circle, welcome, and please come.
I'll get it out as soon as possible. Yeah. And links in the show notes, and thank you, brothers, for doing this essential work. Truly. Thank you so very much from the depths of my heart. All right, let's close with Jack Cornfield, who's an impeccable man in my eyes. He says, in even the worst landscape of human darkness and difficulty, there shine beacons of light. They are not necessarily cast by particularly powerful or holy people who possess grandiose strategies for changing the world. They most often radiate from simple, ordinary people who in their intimate encounters with tragedy, injustice, and terror have been transformed and have learned how to respond to the world around them with the simplicity and power of their faith, love, peace, and compassion. There is no power greater than the power of love, no shadow that can withstand the power of compassion, no demon that can overwhelm the power of open-heartedness. Through their example, our eyes are open to the possibilities of bringing light to our own shadows and peace to the world.
May it be like that.
So it is.
Oh,
Hey, thank you so much for welcoming us and using your storytelling and your people to help feed this fire. Thank you, brother.
it's an honor. Yeah.
Thank you, Tay.